All right, high rollers, UFC junkies, a guy today who I check out quite frequently on YouTube. His channel constantly updating with new videos, breaking UFC news, commentary. He's opinionated, speaks his mind, and just like me, he loves mixed martial arts. Full-time MMA, a free community channel providing entertaining content for all MMA fans. You've got to check him out. Full-time MMA on YouTube and on Twitter at MMA Fulltime. He's with us today. Full-time MMA. Welcome, man. Thanks for being our high roller today.
Thanks for having me, man. That was an awesome introduction. This is my first time doing this. So yeah, that was cool, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we aim to please here at High Roller Radio. Hey, I mentioned breaking news. Truth be told, I find your channel a great way to get all the latest MMA news. I was just on there today, and you've got some breaking news with respect to the champ Daniel Cormier's next opponent, Volkan Ozdemir. What's going on there?
It looks like Volkan Ozdemir, he's been arrested in Florida. Now, there's not too many details on what's happened, but this could affect Daniel Cormier's, he's supposed to be headlining UFC 220 in Boston, I believe, and this was going to be his opponent. Now, out of his two options, Daniel Cormier's opponents, he could have been fighting this guy, Volkan Ozdemir, or Alexander Gustafsson. Now, the UFC, I don't believe they've released a statement or anything yet, but he has been arrested, and I believe the alleged charges are aggravated battery. So I don't know what happened with UFC 220, but that is just breaking today.
I mean, you talk about bad timing. You work your whole life. You train in the gym hours on end to get a shot at the title, and you get one, and then you go and do something like this.
Yeah, and this guy, man, he's really been surging. He's a surging light heavyweight contender. He's undefeated in the UFC. He's coming off of two big knockouts over Misha Serkinov and Jimmy Manawa in the first round. I believe both of those knockouts were within the first minute. So he was getting a title shot, and it was looking, his future was looking really bright. And it still could be. I don't know what's going to happen, but yeah, it was looking good for him. He was getting a title shot over the number one contender, Alexander Gustafsson, and I was looking forward to that fight for sure.
Yeah, that would have been a good fight. Now, speaking of Daniel Cormier, I'm wondering your thoughts on, his status as a UFC fighter and a champion with respect to John Jones. His only loss is, of course, Jones testing positive for steroids on multiple occasions. At first, the fans booed Daniel Cormier. He's sort of come around with his commentary alongside Joe Rogan. I think people are turning around on him, right?
Thug Rose. Yeah, I love his commentary, man. I love it. And also, as far as him being a champion, I believe Daniel Cormier needs to be looked at as, if not the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet, one of. Because a lot of people forget the fact that before Daniel Cormier had his success at light heavyweight, he was undefeated at heavyweight. And he beat the likes of some of the best Roy Nelson's one of the guys. I believe he also fought Frank Mir. So he's beat some of the best heavyweights in the UFC's history, you know what I'm saying? Frank Mir was a former heavyweight champion. So then Daniel Cormier moved down to light heavyweight, and he beat everybody not named John Jones. And one of the losses to John Jones was overturned because he tested positive for steroids. So Daniel Cormier, he really, I think, should be looked at as the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet. That's really what I look at him as, because he's undefeated in two weight classes. I mean, and I know it's an open discussion. A lot of people might not agree with that, but I think people need to put a little bit more respect on his name.
I tell you what, I love Daniel Cormier as a fighter, and I love him in the commentary booth. I think him and Rogan are a good fit. Now, there's a ton of content on your channel, man. I know it's relatively new, but it's growing fast. You got to be happy with that. Can you tell us about Full-Time MMA?
Yeah, as I said, I started off, I didn't even plan on making a channel. I've never had a channel before, a YouTube or anything. I still actually currently am employed. I'm a master of the custodial arts, which is a custodian, if you haven't seen the movie Half Baked. So I just listened to MMA podcasts. I'm a big fan. I kept up on all the MMA news and stuff already, and I know I'm an opinionated person, but whenever I seen his channel, MMA Quick Hits channel was shut down, I was like, okay, I'm going to try, and just see if it catches on. So I started off, with just a cell phone, putting videos up on YouTube. Since then, it's been growing, as you said, pretty fast, and it's definitely a surprise to me. It still kind of hasn't really clicked to me because, I don't know, it's brand new, but the channel, what I do is I cover, results. Whenever there's UFC or Bellator fights, I cover the results. Also, I do predictions. I do news topics, as in the one we discussed earlier. Whenever those break, I try to cover those, and I just bring in pretty much anything that I think, not just for the casual fans, hardcore fans as well, but, there's a lot of MMA going on with all the different organizations, and with just Bellator and UFC, it's hard to cover a lot of the news. So I just bring a lot of news to one channel, one central centralized spot on YouTube, and that's pretty much what I do. Break news, results, predictions, and I do some other fun stuff as well on the channel.
I find it interesting that you say you had no prior background with respect to making videos, because when you go to your channel, I mean, all the links are in the right spot. I mean, how did you learn all this stuff? Because your channel really looks good, and it's growing all the time. I mean, the subscription count goes up daily. The viewer count's rising all the time. I mean, you're growing. You saw an opportunity and you took it.
Yeah, well, I started off making my own, graphics and stuff in the very beginning. I just used YouTube step-by-step instructions on how to make my own logo and stuff, so I didn't get flagged or anything for copyright, because that's an issue I had with the other guy. He started trying to false flag my channel when he seen it was growing, and I understood that, but really I used YouTube for a lot. But now I've got a guy, Darren OTFD, who started making my graphics that you'll see on the channel now, like the banner and the introduction page and stuff. He made that for me, but also I figured out how to use the Audacity sound program just off of YouTube tutorials in Google, as well as image and video editing software I pretty much use now. In high school and stuff, I learned a little bit about, I've always been a little bit into computers and stuff, not super into it. I'm not nerdy into it. I can't do everything, but I knew how to use basic photo and editing software, just all the basics. So I just took that, and as time, because I do this every day, I just get more experience day by day, and I try and grow every day. And I think people can see that on the channel. The quality improves. I still got a lot of plans coming, but as you said, it's still pretty new. So yeah, it's been fun.
Well, for me, I'm telling you this truthfully, it's a great source for MMA news. I mean, I'm always watching Ariel Helwani, checking out all the updates, checking out the Bisping podcast. I just love UFC, and with your channel, I can go there, get some opinion, and also get the latest news with respect to your opinion.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah. I listen to all those guys as well. Ariel Helwani, I go to that's really where I get a lot of the news from. MMA fighting. I mean, all the different websites, the junkies, the imports, BJ Penn. I mean, so I just, wherever the news breaks first, I'll just bring it to the channel and give my opinion on it. So yeah, that's pretty much where I go to as well. And I listen to those podcasts, the Bisping podcast. Yeah, so I'm just a big fan.
Now, you mentioned MMA quick hits, and I got to be honest, I used to, watch that guy regularly. I liked his channel. He had astronomical growth. I mean, he just rose. And then one day, poof, I mean, it was gone. It vanished. I mean, and you saw the opportunity to fill the void, but do you know what happened to that guy and why he left, or what's the story there?
Okay, so the story he was giving all of us fans before he left was that one day, I'm just going to shut it down, and I'm going to a website that's $20 a month, and if you can't afford it, you need a better job. It was pretty kind of disrespectful to the fans, and there's a lot of people who listen to me now that used to listen to that channel, and they've called in and voiced their disgruntledness with him because they donated to the channel, and he just, as you said, just shut down overnight and moved to a website that charges $20 a month just for his opinion or whatever. So what happened to him? He said he got shut down, but I mean, just if you go to forums or whatever, I mean, there's a link to his old channel. It said this channel was taken down to copyright or whatever. So I don't want to say anything that isn't a fact or anything, because I don't just, I used to be a fan of the guy, and I don't badmouth him or anything. I didn't until he started false flagging my channel. I don't know if you want to get into that or not. So his channel actually, I believe, got shut down to YouTube. I don't know if he wasn't using the right UFC clips or whatnot, but his channel, if you go to it, there's a link that says it was shut down by copyright. So whenever his channel got shut down, he moved to, I don't know if I should say the website, a website you pay for people's content. And so, yeah, that's when I started. So his channel, I believe, was shut down. He said he was shutting it down himself, but I don't think that's what actually happened. So
I have to say, I was a fan of his. I checked in every day to listen to the videos, the opinions, and all of a sudden he wasn't there. I was disappointed, but I was very happy to find your channel, and you're continuing on with it, and good job. Keep up the good work. I want to talk to UFC now. Maybe I'll just run through some topics and get your thoughts on the certain situations and maybe how you think things will play out. You've done videos on all of these, by the way. First off, Fabrizio Verdum. We saw him victorious last night in Sydney. He's trying to make it back to a title shot. But outside the ring, he may be in some legal trouble. This crazy boomerang incident?
Yeah, the word Boomeranged. Yeah. He got into some trouble with Colby Covington. Colby Covington's been getting into a lot of trouble lately with fans, fighters alike. You know, Colby Covington, if you didn't know, he's the guy that in UFC Sao Paulo, he fought Damian Maia, and afterward on the mic, he said, like, this place is a dump. Brazil, you're all, you know, like a bunch of filthy animals. He said some comments that he took a lot of heat for. So Verdun being Brazilian, you know, a lot of Brazilian fighters have voiced their displeasure with Colby Covington. And Fabricio Verdun, I guess he saw him, and they got into a verbal altercation initially, and looked like Verdun chucked a hot yellow boomerang at him, and now it's, I believe, Colby Covington pressed charges, which he took a lot more heat for. A lot of people are saying Colby Covington as a fighter, you know, you shouldn't be pressing charges on another fighter, which, you know, reminds a lot of people of the incident with Angela Magana and Chris Cyborg. So with that, Colby Covington's pressing charges. So now for Fabricio Verdun, I believe he said he's has to be in Australia for like 50 days because he's got court hearing for this boomerang incident. So yeah, Fabricio Verdun might have gotten into a little trouble, but as far as the title shot goes, I believe Fabricio Verdun is doing a very nice job working his way back to the title. He's taken 2 short notice fights in his last 2 outings versus Walt Harris and now Marcin Tybura. And in the first fight versus Walt Harris, he won in the first round. You know, beautiful. It was dominant, a flawless victory. I don't believe he was hit one time that fight, submission in the first round. And then in his most recent fight, is the number 8th ranked heavyweight contender Marcin Tybura, it was a 5-round war where Fabricio still outclassed Marcin Tybura, and he showed off his chin because he ate a few head kicks that fight in the 5th round. So he showed off his cardio. He made it to the championship rounds. He's just really showcased why he's one of the best heavyweights of all time, Fabricio Verdun, and why he wants his rematch with Stipe Miocic, the current heavyweight champion.
Yeah, you mentioned Colby Covington there. What a hellraiser. More and more fighters are employing this outlandish trash talk style, right? They're trying to make a name for themselves. It worked for Conor, so why not them? Is this where MMA is going, do you think? The outlandish kind of WWE style of promotion?
I do actually think that's where it's going now. I think the transition's not going very smooth because that's not the old school style. You know, martial arts was brought up on respect, you know, but the Colby Covington, really, he doesn't remind me as much of a Conor McGregor as a Chael Sonnen. And it does remind me of like the WWE style of entertainment. Now, Colby Covington, I don't know, man. With him, he's definitely been a hellraiser. Some of his actions, you know, whenever he said he was pressing charges, it's one thing, you know, because Colby Covington, it feels like he's doing a lot of things to make people hate him, make people want to watch him, because that's what it does. Whenever you become like a hellraiser and you turn into the enemy, people want to tune in. Whether they tune in to see you win or tune in to see you lose, they're still tuning in. So I do believe the UFC's going into this, and the UFC's given us reason to believe this with some of their fights. I mean, with George St. Pierre coming back and fighting Michael Bisping, a lot of people questioned, you know, why is that fight instead of versus a top middleweight contender, and the Conor McGregor fights and stuff like that, Floyd Mayweather. So I do believe that's the way the UFC's going. But there's still something to be said for the fighters, like at UFC 217, per se. All of the champions, you know, were considered the trash talkers of that event. Michael Bisping, Cody Garbrandt, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and they all lost. So you still have the people like, hey, look, all the trash talkers are focusing too much on trying to entertain, and maybe it's taken away from their game. So I believe that you kind of have to be a natural at it, like a Conor McGregor, or one of the new guys coming up that reminds me a lot actually of Conor McGregor, Darren Till. It's not so much of just hell-raising trash talk. It's a confidence. You know, like, hey, I'm going to knock this guy out. I just know I'm going to do it. It's not oh, you know, all your people suck. You know what I'm saying? It's not like just trying to draw that hate. It's more of a confidence thing. So I do believe that the UFC is trying to bring in the biggest numbers, though. So I don't want to say they enjoy the entertainment. They can't enjoy, you know, Colby Covington pressing charges on Fabricio, but they probably will enjoy Colby Covington's next numbers on his next fight, because he's almost worked his way up to a title shot with some of this trash talk versus the current champion Tyron Woodley.
Yeah, that would be quite a fight. A lot of people want to see Tyron Woodley go to town on Colby Covington.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't want to see the fight. They want to see Tyron Woodley shut this guy up.
Now, Conor McGregor, he's on top of the world in 3 years from nobody to fighting Floyd for $100 million. Of course, he's made headlines again, rushing the cage at Bellator the other week there in Ireland. This guy is amazing no matter what he does, good or bad. I mean, he really is something, isn't he? How much fun have you had just covering and doing videos on Conor McGregor the past year or two?
It's just so fun, man, because he's so polarizing. Like, if you say one good thing about Conor McGregor, you get called a Conor McGregor stan. And if you say one thing criticizing him, all the Conor McGregor fans just, oh, I hate this video. This is the first time I ever had to thumbs down you. Like, it's just so polarizing. But to me, it's really fun. I enjoy the entertainment. Now, with his most recent incident at Bellator, I do believe might need to either tone it down. I don't know. I don't believe that was, I believe that's actually more serious than some people are portraying it, because he does have a lot of diehard fans that where Conor McGregor can do no wrong. But what happened at that Bellator incident is really, to me, serious. Putting your hands on an official. It's happened before in the UFC, and Dana White himself has said, like, the first guy, Jason High, was actually kicked out of the UFC, and then Roy Nelson, who it happened to most recently, I believe he was only suspended for 9 months, and Dana White himself said, Roy Nelson should be buried for putting his hands on an official. Well, now with this Conor McGregor situation, it happened at Bellator, so I don't even know if the UFC, I don't know who's responsible for this, but still, Conor McGregor put his hands on a sanctioned official and everything else that led up to that. So, I mean, I enjoy covering Conor McGregor. I don't want to see, the fall of Conor McGregor, though, with some of his most recent antics. I am a little worried.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there, because he's got to walk that fine line now. I mean, he's on top of the world. He got there because he's entertaining. He's funny as hell. Everyone loves him. They want to see him fight. They want to see him win. They want to see him hit that microphone hard. And he did that, but now he's at the very top. And there's a chance he could come down hard if he's not careful.
Yes, and especially with the UFC situation, because, I mean, Conor McGregor and the UFC's relationship is very vital, because that's essentially his business partners. A lot of people believe Conor can just go be successful in doing his own venues or doing his own thing, but what he just did recently could alter his relationship with the UFC, because every time somebody brings up what he's done, they have to bring up Bellator, which is one of the UFC's biggest competitors. So, I mean, and as to your point, a lot of people do want to see him fall, but I don't want to see his partners, turn into those same people. A lot of people, are I don't know if it's jealousy. With the fighters, it might be jealousy, some of the fighters. But, that's what I'm worried about, is the UFC and Conor McGregor's relationship, because if the UFC wants to see him fall, I believe that's worse than a lot of just the fans, because that's a part of Conor McGregor. Even if people want to see him fall, it kind of, goes back to the Colby Covington thing. They're just going to tune in to see his fight. All of the stuff that's happened, it might make Conor's next fight bigger, even though it might not be for the right reasons. Now, he does have to walk that fine line so nothing bad happens and he doesn't jeopardize his fighting future. But yeah, I do believe a lot of people are starting to want to see him fall. But it's not just because he's at the top. What he did recently was actually pretty serious. Like, people like Chael Sonnen, I listen to his podcast as well. He said his relationship with Conor McGregor was permanently changed when he seen Conor McGregor put his hand on that official. So Conor McGregor's actually, could sever some of his crucial relationships that have him at the top,
You talk about that relationship between Conor and the UFC. One of the videos you recently did, which I enjoyed, was about the rankings and how GSP out of nowhere goes above Conor in the rankings. Is it possible those two are going to square off? I mean, was that a ploy to tug at Conor McGregor's pride?
That definitely could have been it. I mean, there's a lot of speculation on what that was, because whenever George St. Pierre beat Michael Bisping and became the middleweight champion, they moved him to the number 3 pound-for-pound fighter on the UFC's rankings. Well, after the Conor McGregor Bellator incident, which had nothing to do with Conor McGregor or George St. Pierre fighting, Conor McGregor was moved one rank down under George St. Pierre. Now, Conor McGregor's number 3 and GSP is number 2, as you alluded to. So what I immediately thought of when I saw that was, whenever John Jones tested positive after fighting Daniel Cormier, the UFC moved his official ranking down before he was actually stripped of his title. Now, Conor McGregor, with his ranking being moved down, and you have to remember, it's been almost a year since he won his lightweight title, and UFC champions have, I don't know if it's a certain, like 12 months or 18 months, but in their contract, they have to defend their belt within a reasonable amount of time or vacate it. So, with Conor McGregor's recent incident at Bellator, we don't know if he's going to face any sanctions. We know the Association of Boxing Commissions has came out, and they've talked about how serious this incident is, and they've said that the UFC has punished Conor, but they still have to see if they're going to do anything. So if Conor McGregor has to be punished for or suspended or anything for any amount of time, it's very possible that he, like John Jones, may be stripped of his title. So that's what I thought of. Now, as far as George St. Pierre and Conor McGregor, that fight, I do believe could happen, even if Conor McGregor is stripped of his title. Because if Conor McGregor does not get stripped of his title, he would have to face Tony Ferguson, the current interim champion. If he does, he'll be out for a little while. And as I said before, alluded to, his next fight might be even bigger because of his recent chaos. So if he comes back without a belt, it opens up the George St. Pierre fight, which a lot of people want to see. I believe that would be the biggest fight the UFC could put on. To me, that's like the Floyd Mayweather-Manny Pacquiao of UFC, just because it's, it makes more sense. It's not one guy going to another sport, facing the best of all time. These are two current guys in the same sport that people want to see fight. One guy, George St. Pierre, who's came back and just won a belt up a weight class, versus Conor McGregor, who's known as the champ. Whether or not he has a belt or not, he's always going to be known as the champ. So I believe that would be the biggest fight possible, and I do believe that a lot of people are starting to angle for that fight, or would pay to see that fight. I think it'd be the biggest fight in UFC history for sure.
Wow, that would be a crazy fight. We're on the line with Fulltime MMA on YouTube, at MMA Fulltime on Twitter. Just a few more questions, if you don't mind. Cub Swanson seems frustrated with the UFC. All he does is win, but can't seem to get a title shot, or at least make progress towards the title. A lot of fighters in the UFC are unhappy these days. Ryan Bader left. Rory McDonald, the Canadian, recently left. Chael Sonnen is now with Bellator. Where is the UFC right now? And Bellator seems to be climbing.
Well, to me, a lot of people consider Bellator as the B league and UFC is the A league. I always make the joke that Bellator is no longer the B league. They're like the 1 B league, and the UFC is the 1A league, because they're making moves. Everybody that the UFC doesn't re-sign is signing with Bellator, and a lot of them are happy. The Reebok deal with the UFC, a lot of people have voiced their displeasure with that, and people like Cub Swanson, who feel like they deserve a title shot, and they might be getting tipped over for the wrong reasons. Like Cub Swanson, he's about to fight his last fight on his UFC contract. He was one of the only other options aside from Frankie Edgar, who was supposed to be getting a title shot versus the current featherweight champion Max Holloway. So he's recently voiced his displeasure and said, maybe I'm not good enough for the UFC, or we've heard this from several fighters. But yeah, man, I think Bellator, they're right on the UFC's heels now. As far as their overall talent pool, it's not there yet, but there's definitely some of the biggest guys at Bellator, their champions, could beat some of the current UFC champions. As for instance, Rory McDonald, as you said, he's signed with Bellator. He's going to be fighting for their welterweight title coming up soon, January 20th, I believe, in Inglewood, California. And so if he wins that title, then he's got to win over the current UFC champion, Tyron Woodley. So you could easily argue that Bellator has the best welterweight on the planet. Gegard Mousasi, he takes a lot of heat for his Bellator debut, but he fought that fight with one eye. Gegard Mousasi is a guy that a lot of people consider one of the best middleweights on the planet. So Bellator's picking up some of the best fighters on the planet, and Cub Swanson, I believe he might make that move. I mean, he's fighting out the last fight in his contract. He didn't get his title shot, and he's got one fight left in his contract. So, I mean, I love what Bellator's doing. I've become a huge fan of Bellator just over the recent year, just with some of their signings. Some of the guys you named, they've got the Bellator heavyweight title tournament coming up. I'm going to be watching every fight of that. So, I mean, now there are some cards that are lackluster, but I mean, you could say that about the UFC as well. But hey, I'm looking forward to Bellator and the UFC. That's really all I watch right now is both of those. But Bellator, they used to be kind of the laughingstock a couple of years ago, but now I think everybody's taking Bellator serious.
Yeah, it's a fun time to be an MMA fan, and wow, wouldn't that be something if Rory McDonald wins the title? We saw Conor fight Floyd Mayweather. Why couldn't Bellator and the UFC do a cross-promotion between a McDonald fight and maybe GSP? Oh, wow, the two Canadians. That would be something.
I think they're actually like teammates. Rory McDonald looks up to GSP, but Rory McDonald versus Tyron Woodley too, champion versus champion.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I don't think GSP and Rory will ever fight each other. I think they've said that on record. Real quick, Joe Rogan and this simmering feud with Ariel Helwani. What's going on there? That's interesting.
I don't know if they actually, if it's, some people might be looking too far into this, but I don't even know if you would consider it a feud. Just recently what had happened was Joe Rogan started a new MMA show, and he has a Joe Rogan podcast, which I listen to as well, big fan of that. But he just did a branch off of that, and it was originally called the JRE MMA Hour. Now, Ariel Helwani, I believe a lot of MMA fans know, he's got the biggest MMA podcast, I believe, of all, and it's called the MMA Hour. It's been around. It's every Monday. And so when Joe Rogan named his show the JRE MMA Hour, a lot of people were like, we're like, whoa, what is he doing? But he came out and issued a public apology and said he forgot the Ariel Helwani show was named the MMA Hour. And so that was what happened recently. Now, before I had listened to Ariel Helwani's podcast, and he had alluded to, like Joe Rogan doing his podcast while he was doing his shows. Like, there might be a little feud there, but Joe Rogan doesn't address it. Or he also said that Joe Rogan hasn't invited him on his show. So if there's a feud, I only know about it from Ariel Helwani and the hints that he's thrown out there, and then Joe Rogan's recent public apology he issued and kind of deboing Ariel Helwani's show name.
Yeah, like he didn't know what the name of the show was.
Yeah, he said I forgot. Like, honest mistake. Like, wow, Joe Rogan's a busy guy. It very well could be an honest mistake. But that's hard for a lot of MMA fans to believe.
A busy guy who smokes a lot of dope. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that one. Lastly, I know you're ready for this fight. Real quick, who's going to win UFC 219? Holly Holm or Cyborg? What a rock'em sock'em one that'll be.
Ooh, man, who's going to win? I think Chris Cyborg was probably the favorite to win, but I think Holly Holm is going to be very underrated coming into this fight because she's really, ideally, in my head, got the perfect style for Chris Cyborg. Holly Holm is a counter striker, kind of like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson or Anderson Silva, where if you play into their game, and you charge into them, they can clip you up on the way in and drop you. Chris Cyborg, she's just a dominant fighter that's going to come in there and try and get you out of there. So she could very well play into Holly Holm's game. And Holly Holm, she's fought for this title before. It was versus Jermaine Durandamy, and she lost for the inaugural women's featherweight title. But I believe this is going to be a great fight, and I would probably lean toward Cyborg just right now, but I'm going to do more research, just do a lot more as this fight builds up, and just watching like some of the Dan Hardy breakdowns and stuff. I love watching those, and yeah, that's a great fight.
Yeah, that's going to be a great fight. I mean, she did it to Ronda. Why not Cyborg? Let's hope it's close.
Yeah, and if she is able to beat Cyborg, she'll have a win over the two most dominant UFC champions in history. So that would be awesome for Holly Holm.
That would be something else. Hey, man, this was something else. Really appreciate your time. It's been a real treat. Full-time MMA on YouTube, at MMA Fulltime on Twitter. You got to check them out. Breaking news, commentary. You will love the content. Thanks for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. This was surreal, man. Thanks for having me again. Full-time MMA on YouTube. You already shouted that out. So, yeah, it was awesome. Maybe we can do this again.